Did you know that happiness is actually a superpower? It's true. And not only that, but consciously cultivating happiness and joy in your life on a daily basis, especially in the midst of a world that can seem pretty dark and depressing most of the time, can be truly transformative for your health, your relationships, and your overall well being. Happy people live longer, they're more attractive, they have more fun. So, I guess the question we need to ask is how? How can you be happier right where you are? How can you be happier when there's so much about life that isn't all sunshine and roses? How can you be happier today? And that's exactly what today's episode is all about. We're taking a deep dive into the science of happiness, what it is, and why it's so important, and sharing some simple strategies for actually increasing your happiness levels and feeling more joy in your everyday life. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Soukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. Once again, my name is Ruth Soukup, and I'm the founder of Thinlicious and the creator of the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you probably already know that I am pretty much obsessed with helping women over 40 lose weight and get healthy. In fact, I'd probably go so far as to call it my mission in life. And I know that probably sounds extreme, and I guess it is. But to me, this mission is about so much more than just weight loss or being able to look good in your skinny jeans. To me, what it's really about is freedom. The freedom to look and feel your absolute best. The freedom to not ever be controlled by food addictions ever again. And the freedom to be able to pursue all of your big goals and dreams because your weight and your health are no longer holding you back. Because honestly, I know exactly how it feels to not have freedom in this area of my life. I struggled with my weight and my health for so long, literally for years and years and years. I wasted so much time and energy trying one diet after another, just trying to get a handle on it. And it affected me in so many ways. I lost my confidence. My relationship struggled. My business suffered. And I really honestly started to lose hope that I would ever be able to fix it. And maybe that's how you feel right now. Beaten down, exhausted by the struggle, worried that there's no solution. If so, I just want you to know, I want to start by letting you know that I have been there too, and that is why I care so much. Because now I know the other side of that. Things finally turned around for me when I decided to take a totally different approach. Instead of trying yet another new diet, I actually decided to do some real research into the science of weight loss and the things that cause us to gain weight in the first place. And what I uncovered absolutely shocked me because it's literally the opposite of everything that we have been told our entire lives about what's healthy and what's not healthy and what will help you lose weight and what won't. Frankly, it's a travesty. And I'm probably going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but as you can probably tell, it gets me real fired up. But that's what Thinlicious is all about. It's basically a health revolution, and that's why we call ourselves health rebels. And I could probably spend my whole time today talking about just that one thing, but I won't because what I want to talk about today is really important too. But please just know that if you are new to this podcast and to Thinlicious, we have some awesome free resources that can help you learn more and help you get started on your own health journey. The easiest thing is to just grab our free guide. It's called Flip the Switch, and it will explain a lot more about everything I was just saying. You can grab that at thinlicious.com/guide. Once again, that URL is thinlicious.com/guide. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's dive into what I really want to talk about today, which is frankly something that might actually seem a little bit off topic if you don't really understand how all of this is connected. Because I want to talk about happiness and more specifically, the science of happiness and why it matters so much in your life. Because if you are at all like me, then you have probably spent a good portion of your life not really thinking necessarily so much about happiness and just taking for granted that it was something that happened to you rather than something that you could actually control and choose. And honestly, that is such a big mistake because the truth is that happiness is not just a feeling that comes or goes, right? It's not just a state of being that some people are born with and others are not. It's not a result of our circumstances. Happiness is actually a skill that you can learn. It is a muscle that you can strengthen. It's a superpower that you can cultivate. And the more you understand about what happiness actually is and how it works, the more you can do to increase your happiness level on a daily basis. And not only that, but the more that you work on increasing your own happiness, the more that you'll find it has a ripple effect on so many other aspects of your life: your physical health, your emotional well being, your relationships with others, your productivity, your resilience, and even your ability to lose weight and get healthier. So that's what I want to dive into today. I want to talk about happiness, what it is and what it isn't, and why it's so important. And then I want to share some simple strategies for increasing your happiness levels in your everyday life. But before we do that, let's start with the very basics. What is happiness, really? Because when it comes to defining happiness, I think it can be a little bit tricky because happiness is actually not just one thing, but a combination of many different things. For the most part, happiness tends to be a subjective experience, right? It's subjective versus objective. And what makes one person happy may not make another person happy, right? Might not be the same for everybody. But that doesn't mean that happiness is completely arbitrary and that everyone has a different definition. In fact, researchers have actually been able to identify a few key elements that are common to most people's experience of happiness. The first of these is what's known as hedonic well being, which basically refers to the presence of positive emotions and the absence of negative emotions, right? This is the feeling of joy and contentment that comes from doing something that makes you feel good. The second element of happiness is what's called life satisfaction, which is a more cognitive assessment of how happy you are with your life as a whole, right? This is kind of the feeling of fulfillment that comes from living in alignment with your values and purpose. And then finally, there's what's known as the eudaimonic well being, which is a combination of both hedonic well being and life satisfaction. And this is the feeling of flourishing and thriving that comes from living a meaningful life and having a sense of purpose and contribution. So, in other words, happiness is not just about feeling good in the moment or having a positive mood, although that's definitely a part of it. It's also about having a sense of fulfillment and eudaimonia. It's a hard word to say, right? Eudaimonia, that you are living a life that matters. And I think that's an important distinction to make, that happiness isn't just about feeling good, but about having this sense of purpose and fulfillment in your life. Because if you don't feel like you have purpose or fulfillment, then it's almost impossible to be truly happy, right? Those feelings are fleeting. Feelings will always be fleeting. And, when I look back, I see that this was probably a big part of my struggle with depression so many years ago. If you've heard me tell my story before, I went through a really terrible depression. It was years long. I attempted suicide multiple times. I was hospitalized on and off for several years. But a lot of people didn't really understand it, right? Because from the outside, it kind of looked like I had it all together. I was a straight A student. I was about to graduate from college with honors. I was married, had this really nice husband. We had a cute little house. I had nice clothes. I had all the things that people would look at and consider like, oh, she's doing great, right? Like, what a good life. But inside, I was completely lost. I was doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, not because any of it was my passion or my purpose, but because, I wanted to be a good girl. I wanted to do the right things. I wanted to get straight A's. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to achieve things. And I was sort of just going through the motions. And so when you added the other hard stuff to the equation, right? Basically kind of dealing with major childhood trauma and a marriage that looked okay from the outside, but was actually falling apart, it was sort of the perfect storm. And I literally just went off the deep end. I could not cope with life. I couldn't see a way out. It felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And I went into a very, very dark place for several years. And frankly, it almost killed me. And if that's the part that you can relate to, this feeling of not having a clear purpose or a deep sense of meaning in your life, then we're actually going to talk a lot about that part, right? That eudaimonic well-being and how to cultivate more of that fulfillment in your life, because I think it's a really, really important part of the happiness equation. So that's kind of what happiness is, right? But why does it matter so much? Why is it worth actually working on and trying to increase your level of happiness in your life? Well, it turns out that happiness actually matters in a really big way for our overall health and well being, right? And not only that, but it has a huge impact on so many other areas of our lives: our relationships, our productivity, our ability to bounce back from failure, and even our likelihood of success in general. In fact, numerous studies have shown a direct correlation between happiness and a whole host of positive benefits. For example, happy people have been shown to have stronger immune systems, they have better cardiovascular health, they have a lower risk of chronic disease, and they tend to live longer. Happiness has also been linked to greater success in general, as well as higher income levels. Happy people are more likely to be promoted, more likely to have fulfilling careers, and more likely to be seen as leaders. And then there's the impact on our relationships. Happy people have better relationships with others, including their spouse and their friends and their family members. They have more empathy, they have more compassion. They're more likely to attract positive people into their lives. And perhaps most significantly, happiness has a huge impact on our ability to overcome adversity and to bounce back from failure. Happy people are more resilient, and they're more likely to see failure as a learning opportunity rather as a reflection of their own worth. So, in other words, happiness is not just a nice thing to have, guys. It's actually a game changer, right? It's the secret sauce to all the things that we want in life: better health, more success, stronger relationships, greater resilience. It is a superpower that has the ability to transform your life in so many ways. And that's why I think it's worth spending a little bit of time and effort to actually understand what it is and how to cultivate more of it in your life. Because the reality is that happiness is not something that just happens to us, right? It's a choice that we have to actively make every single day. Let me say that again. It is a choice that we have to actively make every single day. And that can be a little bit scary to realize that we actually do have the power to choose happiness, but that we can also choose to not be happy. And it's a choice that we're making every single day without actually realizing it. I mean, think about all the little things that might make you feel unhappy. Maybe it's the traffic on your way to work, or the fact that your kids were fighting this morning, or that the scale said that you gained a pound, or that you're worried about something that happened yesterday, or maybe it's the fact that you're just too tired to feel happy, or that you feel overwhelmed with everything that you have to do. So, just the other day, my husband, this just like really hammered it home for me, right? My husband came into my office in the morning, right? I'm working away in my home office, and he asked me if I wanted to have a lunch date, and which is not a normal occasion, right? He doesn't usually come to me. I usually eat lunch at my desk. And so he comes and he's like, "Honey, do you want to go for lunch today?" And so even though in my mind I was thinking, "Oh my goodness, I have so much I want to get done today. I don't really have time to take an hour to go to lunch." I was like, "Sure, honey, that would be great." And then he tells me he's been craving this burger from there's this little hole in the restaurant, hole in the wall restaurant just down the road from us, right? And he can't stop thinking about this burger he had there. It was so good, and he wanted to go there and get another one. He wanted me to try it. So I'm like, "Okay, we'll go get burgers." So lunchtime comes around, and we get in the car and we head over there, and wouldn't you know it, it's closed. They're closed on Mondays. And he was so mad, right? So upset because he really wanted that burger. So I'm like, "Okay, well, what are we going to do? We still need lunch. Let's go to Hog Bodies, the other hole in the wall place close by." But we get there to Hog Bodies, and it's so busy, right, that we can't even find a place to park. And we live kind of out in the country, so there's not a lot of choices. And at this point, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I do not want to have to drive another 20 minutes to the next closest restaurant. I'm going to spend the rest of my day trying to find a stupid burger that I don't even want." So I say, "Well, okay, well, why don't we go to the Wendy's at the Love's Travel Station," which was pretty close to where we were. And you guys, I am not a fast food person. I would never suggest fast food under normal circumstances. I hate it. I've never even been to Wendy's before, so I had no idea what a Wendy's even has, right? And normally my husband would have probably been so excited about me wanting to go to Wendy's because, like I said, I never will choose fast food. But he was just mad. He wanted that burger, the one that he couldn't have. So we went and we had lunch, and it was Wendy's, so not awesome, but mostly it was not awesome because our date had turned into a grumpy husband who was just angry the whole time, right? The joys of marriage. And it was funny because we've been married for a really long time. I wasn't fazed by it. But when we got home, I was like, honey, this was not a very good date. You had a very bad attitude. And he laughed and he agreed that he did have a bad attitude. And we decided we will try again on a day that's not a Monday. But we all have those things, right? That everyday stuff that just like puts us into such a funk and makes us feel so unhappy if we let it, because he could have chosen a different thing, right? He could have chosen to be happy that we were on a date. He could have been chosen to be happy that we were going to Wendy's. And I'm not trying to throw him under the bus here because we all do this kind of stuff. But the choice to be happy is really just the choice to focus on something different, to focus on the good, on the positive, on the things that we have to be grateful for. And that's really the key to understanding happiness, that it's not just an emotion that happens to us, but a way of thinking and perceiving the world that we actually have the power to change. So, how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate more happiness in our lives and make the choice to be happy every single day? Well, let's talk about that, because the good news is that there are actually a lot of things that you can do to start increasing your happiness levels on a daily basis. It's going to take work, but there are things that you can do. Because, and I mentioned this earlier, but happiness is not just one thing, right? It's a combination of many different factors and elements. And what that also means is that there's no one size fits all approach to increasing your happiness levels. What works for one person might not work for somebody else. So if you try some of these things and you're like, yeah, that didn't work at all, that's okay. Try something else, right? But that being said, there are a few strategies that have been shown to work for most people, right? And these are things that have been backed up by scientific research and that have been proven to have a positive impact on happiness levels. And so while you certainly don't have to do all of these things, the more that you can incorporate them into your daily life, the more likely you are to see a significant increase in your overall happiness. So let's dive into these 7 simple strategies for increasing your happiness levels in your everyday life. Strategy number 1 is to practice gratitude, right? This is probably the most important one. To practice gratitude on a daily basis and actually take the time to intentionally focus on the things that you have to be thankful for and to actually express that gratitude in some way. And this is so simple, but it's so powerful, because when we're feeling unhappy, it's usually because we're focusing on the things that we don't have, like the burger, right? Or on the things that we wish were different. But when we intentionally focus on gratitude, it changes our perspective and helps us to see all of the things that are going right in our lives. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. Some people like to keep a gratitude journal where they write down a few things that they're grateful for every day. Other people find that it's helpful to just take a few minutes to think about those things before they go to bed at night. Other people might choose to express their gratitude out loud, either to themselves or to someone else in prayer, right? There's lots of ways that you can do it. But the key is to be intentional and to make it a daily practice, because that's what allows it to become a habit that actually changes the way that you think and perceive the world. The second strategy for increasing your happiness level is to cultivate more mindfulness in your life. And what I mean by that is to try to be more present and fully engaged in each moment rather than getting caught up in thoughts about the past or the future. And I will tell you, this is something that I learned a lot about when I was hospitalized for depression. At one of the hospitals I was at, they used something called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is a type of therapy founded by Marsha Lanahan that focuses specifically on mindfulness. And we would literally practice every day on just being fully present in the moment. And it might sound crazy, but it's amazing how even now, 25 years later, right? I've been fully okay for 25 years, but I still use those skills. I've even used them with my kids. In fact, when one of my daughters was really struggling with emotion regulation not too long ago, we ordered a DBT workbook for her. We found it on Amazon, right? It was a DBT workbook for teens to just kind of work through and help her develop some better coping skills. And it actually helped a lot, right? Just this idea of being mindful and practicing mindfulness. Because the truth is that most of us spend a lot of time dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. And that takes us away from actually experiencing the joy that can be found in the present moment. And that's a problem because when we're not fully present, we're not actually living our lives. We're just going through the motions and missing out on all the good stuff. So, one of the best things that you can do to increase your happiness is to start practicing mindfulness. And this could literally be as simple as just taking a few deep breaths and really focusing on the sensations in your body. Or it could be something like going for a walk in nature and paying attention to the sounds and smells around you, not just being on your phone, right? Or it could be something that you do on a regular basis, like yoga or meditation. Or you might even want to look up one of those DBT workbooks on Amazon and actually take the time to work through it. But that's the second thing, cultivate mindfulness. The third strategy for increasing your happiness levels is to prioritize meaningful relationships in your life. Because the truth is that happiness is not a solo endeavor, right? It's something meant to be shared with other people. And when we don't have strong, meaningful connections with other people, it's really hard to feel happy. In my own life, I don't even think that I realized how important this was until COVID happened, honestly. Because prior to the pandemic in 2020, I had basically spent 10 years working my butt off to build my business. I was traveling all the time, but I also did a lot of networking, right? At conferences and masterminds. So I had made a lot of friends, and I'm putting that in air quotes right now too, right? People I considered to be friends, but really were more business acquaintances. But I don't think I really realized that there was like true friendships missing in my life. And then overnight, the whole world shut down and everybody stopped traveling. And that part of my life just sort of disappeared, right? And I talked about this a little bit last week, but for the first couple months, I was just holed up with my family. And it was honestly so good for us to reconnect as a family and for my husband and I to reconnect as a couple. And I don't think we even realized how much we had been drifting through separate lives. And then we started to make friends together in our neighborhood. We ended up connecting with this sort of amazing group of humans that we love so much. And that even now, 4 years later, we're so close to. A lot of us go to church together. Our kids go to school together. We get together on the weekends and sometimes even during the week, right? We have a group chat that offers an endless source of laughs. We've had crazy adventures together. We've rented party buses. We've thrown some epic parties. We've even gone on vacation together, right? We really do life together. And even though we're not even all in the same neighborhood anymore because several of us have moved, we've stayed really close. In fact, just this week, all of the girls are going to make hats together at a tea room for Galentine's, which is so random, but I know it'll be a blast. And frankly, it's been amazing and it has brought so much joy and richness to my life that I don't think I even realized was missing. So I say all that to say, take the time to think about the relationships in your life, right? Both your romantic relationships and your relationships with friends and family. Who are the people that bring you joy and make you feel loved and valued? And how can you make more time for them in your life? How can you seek out those good people who will enrich your life if you don't have those relationships? Sometimes it really is as easy as just inviting people over, right? Have a martini night or margarita night or whatever. So that's the third thing, prioritize meaningful relationships. The fourth strategy for increasing your happiness levels is a bigger one. And frankly, this is one that I think takes some time to figure out, but you've got to find your purpose and you have to live in alignment with your core values. Because as I mentioned earlier, a big part of happiness is having that sense of eudaimonic well-being, the feeling that you are living a life that matters and that you have a purpose and a contribution to make. So take the time to think about what's really important to you. What do you want from your life? What do you feel called to do? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? What are the things that make you feel most alive and fulfilled? And how can you make more time for those things in your life? This is actually something that we talked a lot about during that Ignite Your Best Year Yet event that I hosted a few months ago. And man, I am definitely hoping to do that event again because frankly, it was life-changing for everyone who participated. We talked about vision, we talked about figuring out what you want. And it's so important, right? It just changes things when you start to feel like you have that sense of purpose. But in the meantime, since we're not doing that event right now, maybe it's time for you to start exploring. Read books on topics that interest you, try some new things, take a class, try a new hobby, start volunteering. Seek out those opportunities to learn and grow because the more that you can tap into that sense of purpose, the happier that you will be. We get happiness out of striving, not out of achieving, right? That's a really important thing to understand. So find your purpose. That's strategy number 4. The fifth strategy for increasing your happiness levels is to take care of your body. And honestly, this is one of the things that I love so much about our Thinlicious system, because the reality is that if you don't feel good in your body, it's really hard to be happy. And I've done plenty of podcasts specifically on this topic, so I won't go too deeply into it here, but in a nutshell, it's the basics, right? It's getting enough sleep, it's eating a healthy diet, it's taking care of your body and moving and drinking water and avoiding excessive caffeine and alcohol and taking the time to rest and recover and do all those things that are going to nourish your body. But it also means being willing to take a look at what you're putting into your body in other ways. Things like the media and the social media you're consuming, because all of that stuff has an impact on how you feel and how happy you are. So the more that you can prioritize taking care of your body, the happier you will be. The sixth strategy for increasing your happiness levels is to seek out joy on a regular basis. And what I mean by that is to actually take the time to do things that bring you joy on purpose. Right? And I don't think that we always do that, because the reality is that happiness isn't just something that happens to us. It's a choice that we have to actively make every single day. It's about being intentional and choosing to focus on the good, choosing to focus on the positive, choosing to focus on things that bring us joy, even when it feels like you don't have time for it, right? To make the time for those things. So, what are the things that make you happy? Is it spending time in nature? Is it listening to music? Is it dancing in the kitchen, playing with your kids or grandkids? Cooking a delicious meal, reading a good book, whatever it is, make time for those things on a regular basis, and don't let yourself get so busy that you forget to actually enjoy your life. And finally, the seventh strategy for increasing your happiness levels is to practice self-compassion and give yourself grace. Because the reality is that we are often our own harshest critics, and that inner voice of self-judgment can really, really bring us down. So be kind to yourself, right? Remind yourself on a regular basis that you're doing the best you can. Celebrate your successes no matter how small they are, and be willing to give yourself grace when they don't go as planned, right? When it doesn't go the way that you wanted it to, it's okay. Because the more that you can cultivate that sense of compassion, the happier you will be. Whew. All right. So there you have it, my friends. My 7 strategies for increasing your happiness levels. And honestly, while they might seem simple, they're not always easy, because the reality is that happiness is something that you have to choose every single day. It's not always the default emotion, and it's not always the easiest emotion to feel, but it is the best choice you can make. And I would love to know, what is your biggest takeaway from today's episode? What is one thing you learned or realized that you can take action on in your own life this week? I would love to hear it. Please, if you do, take a quick screenshot of this episode or take a picture of yourself doing whatever it is that you're doing and share it on Instagram stories. And then be sure to tag me at Ruth Sukup. I will be sure to feature your takeaways in my stories as well. Let's start a happiness chain, guys. Let's do this. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will subscribe or follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you like to listen. And if you know somebody who needs this message today, please be sure to pass it their way. Thanks so much for listening. I will be back very soon with another new episode.